Throughout history, there are stories of entire communities vanishing under baffling conditions. In most instances, theories eventually emerge, offering explanations that, while not always certain, become widely accepted. Yet, in a few rare cases, the events are so mysterious that no single theory can fully unravel the truth. This tale is one such enigma, a village lost without a trace. It was early morning when Joe Lal packed the last of his gear into his canoe, ready to navigate the winding river. The previous night had carried a bitter chill, yet this November felt surprisingly mild compared to others he'd endured while trapping in the remote Northwest Territories of Canada. This time, however, it wasn't the biting cold that spurred him forward. It was hunger. His latest journey into the wilderness had offered little bounty, providing few opportunities to replenish his supplies. Fortunately, he knew of a nearby Inuit village along the shore of Lake Anjikuni. With any luck, the villagers would accept the furs he'd managed to gather in exchange for food and essentials. After an hour of paddling, Joe finally spotted a slender wisp of smoke rising against the horizon, leading him toward the lakeside settlement. Smiling with relief, he shifted his course, guiding his canoe closer to the humble cluster of huts that soon came into view. His canoe's prow scraped onto the frozen shoreline as he made his way into the seemingly peaceful village. At first, Joe wasn't alarmed by the silence. It was still early, after all, and many of the villagers could easily have been away, hunting beyond the bounds of the settlement. But as he explored further, a gnawing realization took hold. Every hut, every shed stood utterly vacant. Fires were still flickering, and food lay waiting to be cooked, as if the villagers had only just stepped away. Yet of the people themselves, there wasn't a single trace. Perplexed, Joe pushed deeper into the settlement, determined to find answers. Toward the village's edge, he discovered a scene even more chilling: the remains of the village's sled dogs, all of which had starved in their places, frozen in the biting cold. Even stranger, the graves of the villagers' deceased had been disturbed, leaving gaping holes where once lay the departed. With dread creeping through his veins, Joe weighed his options. Hours slipped away as he searched in vain for clues, but no hint of their fate or any sign of their return emerged. With daylight fading fast, Joe felt a rising urgency. The thought of journeying back in darkness was hardly appealing, nor did he wish to spend the night alone in the empty village. Resolving to leave, he gathered as much food as he could carry. With the sky dimming, he hurried to his canoe, pushing off from the shore and steering into the main channel just as darkness overtook the landscape. As he cast one final glance over his shoulder, Joe caught sight of the desolate village bathed in an eerie bluish glow emanating from somewhere beyond the horizon. Startled, he grunted and doubled his pace, determined to put as much distance as possible between himself and the unsettling sight, before nightfall forced him to stop and set up camp. In early January 1931, a small squad of Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers departed from their station in Manitoba, embarking on a grueling 560-mile journey across unforgiving terrain toward Lake Anjikuni. Led by Sergeant J. Nelson, the officers had been dispatched in response to a cryptic, distorted telegram that had reached their outpost weeks earlier. The expedition was long and arduous, but relatively uneventful, until the Mounties drew near to their destination. Eager to verify the confusing report they'd received from Joe LaBelle, Nelson ordered his men to gather discreet information from hunters and local tribes they met along the way. Their inquiries led them first to a nearby hospital, where an Inuit trapper named Sak was recuperating from severe frostbite. He had been found by a group of hunters, unconscious and half buried in snow, his legs so frozen he had yet to regain any feeling in them. Questioned at length, Sak could only mutter feverishly about a malevolent spirit called Torn Roth. The officers found little clarity in his fragmented words, so they moved on, eventually directed to an Innu village roughly 150 miles from their destination. Here, they heard rumors of a 10-year-old boy who had wandered into the settlement 2 months earlier, amidst a fierce snowstorm. The village elders confirmed his arrival, adding that the child hadn't uttered a single word since, and that none of the neighboring tribes knew anything about his origins. However, it was the account of a local trapper, Armin Luron, that left Sergeant Nelson most unsettled. Luron revealed that he and his 2 sons had repeatedly observed strange bluish lights in the night sky over the past few months, lights that appeared to follow them on occasion. Once, they even glimpsed a large cylindrical object hovering above, shifting into a bullet-like shape before speeding off toward Lake Anjikuni. When the officers finally reached the village, they found it as Joe Lal had described, a small settlement, home to no more than 30 people, and now eerily vacant. Nelson issued orders for his men to spread out and comb the area while he ventured into the heart of the empty village, making detailed notes as he passed through the silent, deserted huts. He surveyed the eerie remnants left behind, meals untouched, spoiled and clinging stubbornly to the sides of cooking pots, their fires extinguished long ago. In one dwelling he found a child's coat, left midway through being mended, needle and thread abandoned where they last lay. The frozen bodies of the huskies matched Joe LaBelle's description, emaciated, starved, and skeletal, lying where they had perished. Reuniting with his men at the burial grounds, Nelson saw the odd depressions in the ground, each hole the size of a grave, hard and smooth with ice. Strangely, there were no marks of tools or hands having disturbed the ground. The headstones had been carefully removed and stacked in neat piles nearby, ruling out any possibility of animals or natural causes disturbing the graves. After spending several tense hours in the village, Nelson ordered his team to return to their horses and begin the long, weary ride back. Upon his return to Manitoba, Nelson reported finding nothing definitive in the village, no clues that could explain why or how the people had disappeared. His investigation revealed no trace of foul play. However, he did make one curious observation. LaBelle, who had claimed to be a seasoned hunter, had actually applied for his trapping license only the year before. Since his discovery, LaBelle had sold his story to the Halifax Herald, a local newspaper infamous for its sensationalism and questionable accuracy. Filing his report, Nelson returned to his regular duties, and no further official investigation was ever conducted. While Sergeant Nelson's report was as comprehensive as possible under the circumstances, it offered no resolution. His findings were essentially the same as Joe LaBelle's, providing no concrete answers about the vanished villagers, other than ruling out a criminal incident. The fact that fires were still smoldering when LaBelle arrived suggested that whatever had happened was recent. Yet there were no signs of struggle or upheaval. It was as if the villagers had simply stopped their tasks and wandered away, leaving their sleds and kayaks as they were. But this didn't explain why they abandoned their huskies or why the dogs had not been fed in days, even with ample food left around the village. Nor did it account for why the graves had been disturbed. For the Inuit, tampering with a loved one's resting place was an act of deep disrespect, yet no conventional means seemed to explain how the graves had been emptied. Nelson's observation that LaBelle was a relatively new license holder didn't necessarily suggest deceit. Perhaps he had worked unlicensed for years before being compelled by authorities to obtain one. Furthermore, LaBelle's story didn't appear to be the fabrication of a fantasist. His account was supported by the police investigation, with no exaggerations detected. And still the question lingered unanswered. What had truly happened in that desolate village? What could possibly account for the sudden, inexplicable disappearance of 30 individuals from their village, leaving behind only sparse traces of their existence? Few logical explanations seem plausible. Perhaps the villagers fled their homes, fearing an impending disaster, maybe an outbreak of disease or a looming threat from a neighboring tribe. but such scenarios seem implausible in light of the evidence. Armin Luron's account of strange lights hovering in the sky is easy to dismiss as the aurora borealis, yet it fails to explain the unusual flying object he and his sons reportedly witnessed, a craft unlike anything recognizable. As an experienced trapper, Luron would certainly recognize the familiar shimmer of the northern lights, so his account hints at something truly out of the ordinary. For years after the incident, rumors persisted that the mounted police, during their journey, were shadowed by mysterious blue lights overhead, with whispers that the RCMP ordered the officers to remain silent. Could it be that the villagers were somehow taken from their homes by a passing extraterrestrial vessel, abducted alongside their dead? Then there's the testimony of the wounded Inuit hunter, Sak, who spoke of a vengeful spirit known in Inuit lore, an enormous, tusked figure with the power to command nature and summon deadly snowstorms. Legends have long spoken of strange creatures roaming North America's vast, untamed wilderness, beasts like Sasquatch, giant humanoids, and even dinosaur-like monsters inhabiting deep lakes such as Lake Anjikuni. Perhaps Torn Roth, as the Inuit call it, is yet another of these bizarre entities. Some theories suggest that this remote region may hold weak spots between dimensions, portals through which the unwary may simply vanish. Over the years, tales abound of aircraft and ships disappearing into such rifts, never to be seen again. Could the missing villagers have crossed into another realm entirely? The case of the vanished Inuit village has captivated writers and investigators alike, with the RCMP repeatedly pressed for further details. Yet, they continue to insist that no crime took place, dismissing the story as an exaggeration, if not a deliberate hoax. And indeed, a close examination of the various accounts adds weight to their claim. Since the initial report in 1930, numerous embellishments seem to have crept into LaBelle's story. Later articles, for example, disagree on the number of disturbed graves or even the type of structures present, suggesting they might have been simple tents rather than permanent homes. If the settlement was indeed temporary, it's conceivable that LaBelle stumbled upon the remnants of a seasonal camp, the inhabitants having moved on in search of more permanent shelter. In the quest for payment and attention, perhaps LaBelle exaggerated or even staged some of the details for the Mounties to find. But, as with so many strange tales from the Canadian wilderness, it's unlikely the full truth will ever surface. Time has buried any chance of uncovering new evidence, and this mystery, like countless others from these remote lands, will likely remain shrouded forever.